All right. Hello. I think we've got some people coming in. Hello, everybody. Welcome. We're so excited to have you here today with us. My name is Destin, and I'm the Director of Community here at Jane. If you've been to a Jane webinar before, hopefully you've had a chance to say hello. And if you've joined us before, you know that we're all about sharing tips and tools to make running your practice a little smoother. So I'm going to give everyone a few minutes to come in. We've already seen some attendees trickling in, so great to see you. Now that I have introduced myself, I would love it if you could all pop into the chat and introduce yourself as well. Share where you're from, what you do. Make sure to flip that chat to everyone. It defaults to hosts and panelists. So if you can flip the chat to everyone and say hello, let us know where you're from, what your discipline is, anything you might want to learn today. We'd love to hear from you. And as you introduce yourselves, I'm going to start with a couple of housekeeping notes for us today. So if you have any questions, please use that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Our teams will be here to answer questions as we walk through this session, and we'll discuss as many as we can at the end. You're also obviously more than welcome to use the chat as well. But if you have a really specific question that you want our panelists today to answer, that is the best place to pop it into the Q&A. And then one thing to note about questions that Heard might not be able to answer all of the specific questions for your specific questions about your tax situation. We might not have the full context. And so in this case, we'll provide a general answer. And at the end of the session, we'll share the best ways that you can get in contact with the Heard team if you'd like some more detail. And if you can't stick around for the whole session, don't worry, it's being recorded and a replay will be emailed to you. And one more thing before we get the ball rolling, we truly value your input, so keep an eye out at the end of this session for a poll to share some feedback. Just seeing in the chat, it's great to see people saying hello. It's great to see people from across North America. Hello, everybody. So great to see you. Again, if you have any early questions, let us know. We're excited to chat with you all. And so now we're going to step over into the next part. And I wanted to introduce our friends from Heard that's going to be here to help us learn all about tax deductions. So I'm going to pass it off to Andrew and Forrest to introduce themselves a little bit.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody. I am so excited to be here and so excited to the Jane team. Thank you, Destin, for the wonderful intro. My name is Andrew Riesen. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Heard. We started Heard once upon a time because my wife was a clinical psychologist, and many of my best friends, by proxy of a never-ending PhD program, were clinical psychologists and helped many of them start their practice, as well as my sister, who is a pediatric dentist who opened her own private practice. And so love supporting clinicians, health and wellness entrepreneurs in the really challenging and sticky area that is back office and all of the really boring stuff. Forrest, you want to do a quick intro?
Yes. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're at. Fun fact is Andrew and I have known each other actually for a little over 10 years, met in college back at Gonzaga. I did see someone in the chat who lives in Spokane, and I think it's a very underrated city. But Andrew and I worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers, it's one of the big four accounting firms, for about 5 years, and really learned our accounting and tax chops there. And then he recruited me a little over 4 years ago to join Heard as our first employee. So I grew up in a small business. Similar to Andrew, loves supporting small business owners. And I think what you'll find today is that neither of us are your traditional accountants. So we're going to try to make it fun, keep it lively, and hopefully do more of that translation opposed to speaking that technical speak. So really excited to be here and excited to share more about tax deductions.
Amazing. And I think that if you love what you do, you can make it fun. And I feel from chatting with you both, you really love what you do. And so I think you're going to make it really fun for our community, which is so great. Before we jump in a bit more, Andrew, I'm curious, how did Herd get started? Can you give us a little bit of a background?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, one of the things that we saw is that many folks were operating in group settings or working in health systems or in the VA, like my wife at that point in time, and were realizing that they could transition into private practice and find opportunities for themselves to build a practice and move towards independence and autonomy and flexibility, which are all amazing underpinnings of what it means to be a private practitioner and a small business owner. And so some of the scariest parts of moving into private practice were, how do I track my income and expenses? How do I stay on top of my quarterly taxes? Oh my gosh, somebody gave me time off before. How do I plan for taking time off? How do I prepare for tax season at the end of the year? And so there were all of these things that people like my wife and many of my friends and my sister were amazing at all of the clinical work and the direct client and direct patient work. But some of that other stuff was just a little bit scarier. And so for us, our goal has always been not to just provide the software and the systems in the background, but the financial literacy, the education, and in a similar vein to Jane, the community to support you as you face some of these really scary and challenging accounting and back office problems as you move into your practice.
Oh, I love that. And I had a question. I'm not sure if there's a interesting story behind it, but I'm always curious about company names, and so I'd love to know why Herd? Why did you pick the name Herd for your company?
So this is really nerdy, and I think as somebody that starts a company, you think about this for like too long and probably overthink it. But the thing that we kept hearing when we were starting the company is I feel like I'm finally heard. I feel like somebody's listening to me. I feel supported. Because one of the biggest parts of being a private practitioner is that it's incredibly isolating, which is one of the reasons I love Jane so much is that community emphasis and the emphasis on support, whether it be messaging or live support. But we just want to help people feel heard and we want to help people through the scary business challenges. And so the name stuck and it's worked since then. Does it associate with a weird accounting and finance platform? Maybe not, but we like the name and we've gone from there.
Oh, that's such a great story. I love that so much. I hadn't actually asked you this before, and so I was like throwing that out there, and I really love that. And then Forrest, what's one of your favorite memories from your time at Herd? Like, what's something you've really enjoyed doing in your last like few years?
I think the favorite memory is working in true startup fashion of in Andrew's living room with his wife Natasha coming down to help, whether it's print returns or do something like that. It just felt so real. And then fast forward, I think it was our offsite, being a remote first company. We do an annual offsite each year, and when you're working in a full remote environment and by yourself in your room, like myself now, you miss some of that connectivity, and you feel so close with the people throughout the year because you've met them on Zoom, but never to meet in person. So actually next week is our annual one in Chicago. And so excited to meet a lot of new folks who have joined in the last year.
Oh, that's so great. And I think that's really cool to talk about like the early startup days because I think that's so relatable to our community members. Like they're startups too. And so like working at home in your basement or in your living room, like that's so relatable and to see that a business scales out of that. So that's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'll pass it off to you both now on to the next part for you both to talk to our team about our community about tax deductions.
All right, let's do it. First, I'll go ahead and click over to the next slide here. Oops, got excited. Awesome. Destin, thank you again for the wonderful intro and for asking questions that have elicited some very fun memories. I appreciate that. So Herd, again, will be really brief. The main goal of this presentation, before I jump in and talk about Herd, again, I want to reiterate, like Forrest said, our goal is to have fun. I know fun and accounting don't always come together, but this is a time for you to learn. There's no expectation that you're going to come out of this call as a CPA or an accountant yourself. And if we're using terminology that you've never heard, just say, hey, Forrest, Andrew, you're using words that we don't get. Just drop it into the chat and we'll help explain what that is. But a good goal for yourself is to come out of this conversation at the end of the conversation having learned one new thing. That could be a new tax deduction for your practice. That could be a new term that you've never heard before. That could be a new way to approach setting up your financial systems or thinking about taxes. And so there is no expectation that you're an expert leaving this call. You'll have the recording. You can always revisit that. And Michael just dropped a link into the chat. And so you can always reach out to our team if you are interested in learning more about our services. At our core, we're a financial software platform that's built for health and wellness professionals. We help folks save time, we help folks save money, and we help give many of the private practice owners that we work with peace of mind of really consolidating all of those things into one place, but having an amazing support team with very fast response times and a very empathetic and knowing approach to what it looks like to run a private practice. And like I said earlier in the call, our main goal as a company is financial literacy for the private practice community and supporting you with the information and the education that you need to be successful. Because as important as it is to set up the systems, it's important to have an understanding of your business as a whole, as you are all entrepreneurs beyond just the clinical and patient work that you do as well. And so very, very, very grateful to be here and excited to jump in and to loosen things up before we jump in here. Forrest and I just wanted to ask you, how familiar are you all with tax deductions? And we will do a readout of the answers and give you a few seconds to jump in here and answer. If you are a tax expert, we are always hiring folks on our tax team. So awesome. Okay, cool. So it looks like we have a select few folks that are very familiar with taxes. So as I said, we are always hiring tax folks, and we love hiring private practice owners on our team. We have quite a few. It looks like most people are somewhat familiar, and many folks are also not very familiar. That means you're in the right place. And so let's have fun. Ask all the questions again. We will answer what we can. Sometimes questions get a little bit too specific. And those are great questions to ask our team from a services standpoint. And so, Forrest, I will hand it off to you to get things started and kick things off for us.
Gotta get used to the slide share. Thanks, Andrew. So I think just to reiterate, right, there's a lot to unpack today. And so some of these concepts you might leave after a slide like, wait, I have more questions. And honestly, that's the intent and just the reality of the tax world. So the goal hopefully today really is setting a foundation, one, with what is a tax deduction, and then getting to the fun piece of those tax deductions that you can hopefully use in your business to save on taxes. So I'm sure you think there's probably some really complex definition when it comes to what a tax deduction is. Whether it could be a pro or a con, but the IRS defines it very simply and vaguely, right? It is a business expense that's ordinary and necessary. You're going to hear those last two words, ordinary and necessary, constantly throughout today, because each business operates differently, whether it's your state, how you operate it, right? So it's so dependent on your individual practice. And oftentimes, while folks will work with a CPA or accountant, is to get that guidance of, hey, I'm thinking about buying this. Is this a tax deduction? The next piece to mention is this synonymous terms for tax deduction: write-off, business expense. Today, we're going to be using that term, or try our best to use business expense, because truly it translates best into how you'll be using these deductions within your business. Again, an easy way to think about tax deductions as a self-employed professional is a business expense. So Andrew and I have done, I don't know, countless, probably 30 or 40 of these webinars, and we've continued to build out this specific slide as folks have asked so many great questions. So building off that very basic, vague definition, what are some key points to think about when it comes to tax deductions? First one, really important. We are going to be focused on the business side of tax deductions, or business expenses. This does not mean there are other types of tax deductions that you can take. Those are called personal tax deductions. So think about like a child tax credit, student loan interest, right? There's plenty of other deductions that the US tax code offers, but today we're focused on specifically the business side. Who's eligible for these deductions? The only folks who are not is if you are solely W-2 employed. So if you are solely W-2 employed and here today, maybe you're thinking about opening a practice, which is great, but if you have no admiration to be self-employed, again, you can't take advantage of these tax deductions, and probably the rest of this isn't going to be too topical. Now, what's very common is someone is both a W-2 employee and self-employed. Absolutely can take advantage of these deductions. The only asterisk there is you can't double dip. So if you work for some sort of group practice or agency and they're reimbursing you for continuing education, you can't then also write that off or deduct it on your individual taxes. Next point is how much you truly save from these business expenses. So hopefully today you'll have a few takeaways of these new business expenses or deductions you were unaware of, but we don't want you to overspend, right? And so when you purchase something, it's not a one-for-one on tax savings. Now it's different person to person because you have each individual tax rates. However, a good just general directional number to use is about 30%. So in this example, if you purchase a $1,000 laptop, you may be saving, quote unquote, about $300 in taxes. Receipts. So folks often ask throughout this presentation is, hey, I didn't know I could buy that for my business. Do I need a receipt? Right. So IRS's guidance is saving receipts that are over $75 expenses and keeping them for 3 years. Now, I would not worry about tagging every receipt individually to a specific transaction or expense. I would recommend putting the receipts that are over $75, like physical copies, just in a folder in case you need them. Why would you need them? One is in the unfortunate event of an audit. Knock on wood, but here in my 4 years at Herd, never had that happen, but oftentimes it's out of your control. And so the IRS may say, hey, Andrew, I need all of your receipts for the last 3 years that are over $75. I think the beauty of the digital world is so much of this is stored online, right? And so would again worry more about the ones that you only get a physical copy, put them in a folder, and then in the event of that audit, you have those ready to go. The other example of when you may need receipts is when your CPA or accountant is filing your taxes at the end of the year. So if Andrew's my client and I saw a $2,000 United Airlines ticket, he's a physical therapist, I would be wondering, what are you doing traveling internationally for physical therapy? Maybe there's totally a rationale or reason. But as the CPA, I just want that extra level of coverage because I'm signing off on this return that this truly was right for a business trip, which we'll talk on later as it's one of the deductions. And then the differing guidance, right? You could type in some of these deductions you're going to learn about today, and you hear another CPA doesn't deduct them, or maybe they deduct it differently, right? Think back to that vague definition the IRS provides on what a deduction is. So the exciting piece is it empowers you in the control as a business owner of making those decisions. I think the scary piece though is wondering, oh shoot, can I deduct this? Can my individual business deduct this? And whether it's CPAs interpreting tax law code differently, whether it's their risk tolerance, or like I talked earlier, the type of business you're doing. And so even if Andrew and I both owned physical therapy practices, his CPA may say, hey, you can deduct this, where my CPA tells me, no, you cannot deduct this. And so it adds a little bit of confusion to it, which is why many folks will partner with a CPA really to get that concrete guidance. And someone to think about when you're evaluating CPAs and accountants, right? Ask some of these questions. What's your risk tolerance? What's your take on this deduction? Because you're going to see a wide array of it. So hopefully we won't have too many hot takes today. We got a wonderful team of CPAs like Michael, who have helped back our guidance. But again, you might find some varying information. Okay, what do you need to track? Outside receipts, I know we talked about that, but how do you track all of these business expenses? You know, most Herd members will have anywhere from 30 to 100 transactions a month, the majority of those being expenses, right? And so those business expenses are your tax deductions. The best way to track them is bookkeeping. So for those unfamiliar with bookkeeping, the concept is categorizing all of the transactions for your business, both income and expenses. And so this actually a screenshot from Herd's bookkeeping tool. And the only inputs needed to do bookkeeping are date, description, and dollar amount, those first three columns. So most of the time, bookkeeping softwares like QuickBooks or Herd connect directly to your bank account and pull this information in. Whereas then you see the category where this individual is doing a lot of travel, hopefully it's all business deemed, travel expenses as the category. There's various other categories, which I'll touch on in a second, but you can kind of start thinking even in the first 17 days of this month, the expenses you've all had. In each one, ideally, you have a category tied to it, which ties back to the IRS tax code. What does this all mean, right? If you're not doing this bookkeeping and categorizing and tracking your expenses or income, it's extremely difficult to understand how your business is performing. So obviously it does give a great record of those deductions and expenses. So at the end of the year, you can hand this over to your CPA. But what about at the end of July? You want to know how much profit you made. Really difficult to do without bookkeeping. And if you don't know that profit at the end of the month, it's really difficult to determine how much do I pay myself? How much do I set aside for quarterly taxes? So I like to describe bookkeeping truly as the foundation to the finances around your business. And so definitely try to stay on top of it, at least on a monthly basis, so you can understand those results. And it'll make it much easier at the end of the year where it's like thinking back in January, what did I buy from Amazon? Right. And so keeping it ongoing, using one bank account to do this bookkeeping, not only is going to make your tracking your deductions extremely easy, but also at the end of the year, right? Be ready to go and understand how your business is performing. The one other call out is if you're new to practice or run maybe a part-time or smaller practice, some folks do this in spreadsheets, right? They'll copy over the date, description, and dollar amount from their bank account and add in a category. So another great way to do it. But I think the hardest part is the accountability. A lot of folks just push this off, and then without it, right, you need those key data points to run your business effectively. All right. So how does this tie into annual taxes? You kept hearing me mention, right? Well, you need to give this to your annual CPA. You need to give this to your accountant. So for those that are not taxed as an S corporation or C corporation, which I imagine is most of you out there today, right? So sole proprietor, LLC, PLLC, for your annual taxes, you fill out what's called a Schedule C. Now, if you did taxes last year, you probably didn't even see this form or fill it out because it's what's TurboTax is doing in the background or your CPA or accountant is filling out. So don't be frightened. You're not going through here and entering number by number. But why I like to pull this X script in from the Schedule C is it ties together bookkeeping to annual taxes. So part 2.8, you'll see advertising, or part 2.18, office expenses. So at the end of the year, you need to tally or total how much you spent in each one of these categories. So using Andrew again as my guinea pig, if I asked him in January, hey, Andrew, how much did you spend on advertising last year? No idea, right? And then you have to go through and start figuring out, or if you're doing bookkeeping, click of a button, advertising 2025, boom, there's your number, right? And so each one of these categories is how the IRS defines this specific expense. From the bookkeeping records, your CPA will then translate the records into this form. So again, the IRS doesn't require it, but if you're not doing bookkeeping, it's almost impossible to accurately provide this information. All right, so now we have another quick poll here around, can you write off unpaid sessions? And there is a right answer. %57% are unsure. Thanks for the honesty. And then kind of split between yes and no. 25% yes, 18% no. So those who answered no, you're correct. You cannot write off unpaid sessions, which stinks as a business owner, right? You're planning for this, you were getting ready for it, and kind of view it as wasted time. If I could have gone and seen another patient or had another session or client, I got blown off, right? Why you can't is that you didn't actually perform the service. The IRS defines income as revenue incurred, right? And so that money never came in to you. Therefore, they didn't pay you, so you don't have a session to write off. The normal follow-up question we get here is, well, what if I provide like pro bono services or sliding scale? Can I write off the difference or the full amount? Like I performed the service, but I didn't get paid. And unfortunately, again, the answer is no. The IRS only allows you to deduct if it's physical goods. So if you're cleaning out your office and you're donating a desk, right, that is a physical good, so it could be written off. Andrew, before we jump into the common tax deductions, I think we're actually doing fairly good on time. Anything to hit on from the last few slides or any other perspective to share?
I'm trying to think of anything. I dropped some takeaways into the
Oh,
chat
beautiful.
on the bookkeeping piece in particular. The bookkeeping, just to reiterate, is truly the foundation for capturing as many write-offs and deductions as you possibly can. And I just want to reiterate because there's probably a wide spectrum of I'm just getting started, I've been in practice for years. Like there is no right way or perfect way. And so any recommendations that we're making here, they might not be right for you or you might not be ready for them. So give yourself the grace as you're starting to learn about these new concepts in the time that you give yourself to set up these systems. These are all awesome things to build towards over time. So I just wanted to reiterate there's no such thing as a perfect process. There are places that we can get to build a lot of structure around it, but at the core, separate your business and personal. I dropped this into the chat because there was a great question there. my feedback that I always provide to folks that we're talking to is if it looks like a business expense, if it smells like one, and if it feels like one, run it through that separate business account, capture it in your bookkeeping, and lean into your accountant or your CPA at the end of the year to help you make that determination. And that is going to be your best bet to capture all of the expenses, because there's nothing worse than running through, your drawers and your file cabinets at the end of the year. And so, stay on top of those things, but don't give yourself a hard time if there's no perfect process. You already have a lot on your plate managing the session work as well.
Definitely. No, thanks for that. And then that separate bank account is so critical to reemphasize again. And so right now, if you're using one account for both personal and business, go to the bank tomorrow and open up a new one, right? And if you're an LLC or PLLC or okay, incorporated, you're required to actually open what's called a business bank account. So keep that in mind. And then the last takeaway, I know I didn't touch on S corps and how it translates into bookkeeping. Same exact way when you think about the Schedule C, except it's called a different tax form, the 1120S, which is filed separately. So if you're an S corp, it doesn't mean you don't have to do bookkeeping. Your bookkeeping is actually just a little bit more complex. All right, so let's get to the fun of it of the deductions, right? So this list is not exhaustive. Obviously, there are so many different angles depending on how you operate your business of what could be this business expense or tax deductions. There's a few in green, and the only one not listed here is the home office deduction. And we're going to do deep dives on the ones in green as well as the top home office deduction shortly. So the thing to remember, ordinary and necessary when we walk through these. I think some are definitely more straightforward. For example, advertising and marketing. You're putting out Facebook social ads, you're building a website, right? Anything you're doing to grow or advertise your business is 99.9% tax deductible. Business registration fees. Again, this one very straightforward. Think about you're forming your LLC. You have to register with your specific city, state, right? There's all these different kind of either annual recurring fees or one-time fees you have to pay to run a business. Obviously, that's ordinary and necessary to run that business. CEUs. This is often one of the most highest expenses on our members' profit and loss sheets because CEUs aren't cheap. And so make sure every one of those you have in your bookkeeping records. And for those who maybe haven't had a business account or dedicated account yet, now's a great time to go back to January 1st on your bank statements or in your brain. What are those expenses that weren't in your business account? And then keep tally of those, because then you can give them to your CPA at the end of the year and say, hey, I forgot some of these in my bookkeeping records, but I want to make sure I'm getting those deductions at the end of the year. Now, if you're an S corp, you want to be much more careful about that as there's some stringent rules, but it happens all the time. And that's why in that bookkeeping slide, you saw that personal or business toggle, because occasionally it happens. Credit card processing fees. So for those brand new to practice and you get those first deposits in, you're like, wait, that wasn't the full amount I should have received. Credit card processing fees aren't cheap, but the great thing is they are deductible. Now, you do not have to do anything around credit card processing fees until the end of the year. Your payment processor, like Stripe, for example, will give you a 1099K come in January. That 1099K shows exactly how much you paid in credit card processing fees. May want to make you throw up if it's your first time seeing it. But you'll give that to your accountant at the end of the year and they'll make adjustment, right? You've already been paid the net amount of those credit card processing fees. And so it's essentially an accounting adjustment they'll do at the end of the year. Membership fees. So any associations, professional development, collectives, anything that's making you better at your profession, whether it's networking, education, tools, and resources, all going to be deductible. Office supplies, and fairly straightforward. I always like to go through an example of this because I think it applies to almost all these deductions of I buy a pack of pens from Costco for my office. And then my daughter comes in and she takes 2 or 3 of those because she ran out of pens for school. Does that mean I just can't deduct the pens that I bought from Costco? No. In these situations, I recommend like this majority kind of S rule. Hey, I bought one, the intention was for business of buying these pens. Secondly, I'm using 18 of them. Do I need to reduce just like $2 off because my daughter took 2 of those pens? No, right? Think about now for huge purchases, it might be a little different. But for those little ones, again, it's the intent the goal. What was that goal of buying these? They were for my office. Softwares, right? Now, if you have any subscriptions, that's always good to double check from your personal side because it might be recurring each month and you don't even know it, right? And these add up over time. So whether it's Zoom, Herd, Jane, all the variety of softwares that enable you to run and operate your practice, deductible. Startup costs get a little hairy. And so if you did have expenses before this year, like January 1st, and it's your first year in business, chat with that about your CPA. There's a good chance it's deductible, but there are some fine tool rules. Books or educational materials, deductible. Exercise equipment, massage tables, image devices, any equipment you're buying, right, for your business, deductible. So before we go into the deep dives, just want to share some examples that we often get asked that usually are not deductible. Again, there's the asterisk there because in certain situations they are. The self-care is often involved, which I would agree if I was the IRS, of, hey, I went to the gym or I went to therapy or I got a massage. That makes me a better business owner because it helps me take care of my mental health, right? I could see the connect. And again, if I was IRS, I would say deductible, but in most of those situations, the IRS is not letting you deduct it. The other common one, clothes. In most professional services professions or health and wellness professions, difficult to make an argument for this one because the IRS defines it as it needs to be something you're strictly working or using for your business and is more of a uniform, right? I know when I was getting physical therapy last year, my physical therapist came in gym shorts and a shirt. And so she likely used those to go to the gym as well, right? So not necessarily uniform. Rarely do we see this come through as an actual deduction. Okay, deep diving into some of those examples here. Vehicle use for business. So the most important piece of vehicle use is defining what it is. Most members of Herd do not get a large deduction here because most of the driving they're doing is from their home to their normal place of business. As you'll see on that fun graphic, that is not deductible, right? But those who are traveling maybe to patients or clients' homes, or maybe going to a lot of conferences or events, right? That is deductible. You'll see on the right side, office to client site or anything else for business would be deductible. There's two ways that this works. Either one, you keep track of all your mileage. Again, only for what the IRS defines as vehicle use. At the end of the year, the IRS will basically allow you to deduct a certain cents, like it's like usually 60 cents a mile. I can't remember what it is for 2025. And so you take 60 cents, say times that 100 miles, and you get $6 deduction. And so that's why I was saying really isn't used that much because most folks we work with aren't driving at a really high volume of mileage. If you are, though, great deduction, and you want to keep track of all of your business trips or vehicle use for these business trips. There's an app called Mileage IQ, which is really helpful for this to track all of those individual trips. The other route is if you are driving heavily, again, and for that vehicle use for business, you could take the percent of actual use. So you'll see this is similar to the home office deduction, which we'll talk about shortly. And this says if I have one car, I drive 50% of it for business and 50% for pleasure or personal, then I can take 50% of the expenses for my car. So adding in insurance, maintenance, repairs, etc. throughout the year. For easy math, let's say that's $1,000. I used 50/50. I could deduct $500. Last piece I'm going to mention here is it's rare that we've seen folks been able to outright buy a vehicle for their business. If that's something you're evaluating, again, recommend chatting with a CPA or accountant as there's some strict rules behind that. It's something around like you have to be driving that vehicle 90% strictly for business. So most folks don't have a second car just sitting in their driveway, right? And so it would truly have to be used a high amount for that to make sense. Business meals. Big thing to call it is at the bottom, 50% deductible. Everything on that tax deduction slide I was talking about earlier is generally 100%. You'll see your favorite two words there, ordinary and necessary. And it can't be lavish or extravagant. So example of that is if, Andrew took me out every month to a steakhouse as his employee or even as his patient or client, The IRS may say, hey, that looks a little lavish. Versus Herd's hosting a holiday party in December, all the employees, and we're taking them out to a nice dinner, right? Hey, there's rationale, right? And sure, it's not ordinary, but it's necessary, maybe once a year, to reward your employees. In that situation, I would just write down the individuals on the receipt. So if anyone asks, hey, what was that $2,000 dinner at Ruth Chris? Oh, we brought 8 people from a team, celebrated something big, right? And so big takeaway here, 50% deductible. I think the other one forgot to mention is that if you're buying food to work from home, not considered a business meal. If you're ordering DoorDash to your office or home and eating by yourself and not discussing any business matters with someone else, unfortunately, not deductible. But if you're buying food or water, snacks for your office for when patients or clients come in, absolutely would be deductible. Business travel. So you'll see, even when you're eating while traveling, it's still only 50% deductible, but everything else you incur while traveling is 100% deductible. So for example, if I go from Seattle to Phoenix for a conference, my parking at the airport, deductible. I get a salad at the airport, 50% deductible. I buy Wi-Fi on my plate, 100% deductible. I get an Uber from the airport to my hotel, 100% deductible, right? And so on and so forth. So travel expenses can add up. I will say this is one area where folks have abused, right? So keep in mind that you want to keep tabs on these expenses and ensure you have like an accurate meaning of this business travel. The IRS loves little tests, and you'll see this at the bottom, right? There is a criteria you need to meet to make it business travel. Most folks, though, end up meeting this. So again, if you're traveling a lot, be sure to keep track of all those expenses. You think about one trip alone, it could have like 20 or 30 transactions. Charge them right to your business account and then get through that bookkeeping and tag them as travel expenses. All right, the beloved home office deduction. The applications or use of this deduction skyrocketed during COVID as so many people were working from home. Again, here there's another test. One, like Andrew and myself as W-2 employees, we cannot take this home office deduction. I'd say the most critical piece to think of is, where do you spend the majority of your work hours during the week? Whether that's administrative paperwork or seeing clients. So if you work, say, 40 hours Monday through Sunday, and 32 of that is from your home, is 8 in an office, principal place. So as long as the majority of time spent while working, right? And again, it could be back office work as well, needs to be done at home. The other piece is the exclusive and regular use. Unfortunately, if you have a studio apartment or your office is in a bedroom like mine where maybe guests stay as well, the IRS doesn't define that as exclusive and regular, right? So that's just how they define it. Chat with your CPA more if you have like an individual use case. But the first piece, like I said, of even using this deduction is ensuring you qualify. Now, there's two options, kind of like vehicle use. There's the simplified method, which is kind of like that mileage route, right? Where it's based off square footage of your office. You get a set allotment, so $5 a square foot. And that does max out at 300 square feet. I don't know many people who have an office bigger than 300 square feet, though. And then the standard method, which is much more common because it's going to have higher savings, is right here. And so bear with me as I kind of walk through this at a high level, but you see on the top, area of office in square foot, area of home. So measure my office. It doesn't need to be down to like the millimeter or specific inch, right? A general assessment is fine. And then the total square footage of your home or apartment. If you have an apartment, you can also take advantage of this. So for easy math, my little office is 100 square feet. I live in an apartment that's 1,000 square feet. That means I can take about 10%, or not about, exactly 10% of my home office expenses. Theoretically, it makes sense, right? My home office makes up a portion of my house. I can't deduct all my home expenses. I can deduct a portion of that. So that's piece one. And then depending on if you're renting or owning, there's going to be different expenses that you can deduct. But let's say you enter in all of your mortgage, property tax, electricity, internet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and it was $10,000 for the year, right? My office makes up 10% of my home. I take that 10%, multiply that by 1,000 or 10,000, and then I get $1,000 deduction. This is the one exception where do not include these in your bookkeeping records, or at least we do not recommend that. Why that is if you put your rent check for your home or mortgage payment from your home in your bookkeeping records each month, then you're overstating your expenses. So if I pay rent of $1,000 and that hits my business bank account, I actually can only deduct $100, right? 10% of that $1,000. So try to keep track of this throughout the year. Like we have a little spreadsheet calculator you can download, but like each month, your electric bill is going to be different. So rather than in March pulling together all these numbers, it's much easier to have them ready to go. All right, Andrew, I'll pass it back to you. Only 1 minute over. That was good on time.
No, that was exceptional time management. I, on the other hand, Forrest, thank you for that amazing and thorough walkthrough, and a big shout out to Mr. Michael Kano in the chat, fielding many questions, and a major shout out to you all for all of the amazing questions. Keep them coming. Forrest and I are going to hang out and chat with you and answer any questions that you might have. And so this is the time to ask them. And I want to reiterate, if you have a question, your friends on this call, your friends from the community probably have that same question as well. And so ask those questions. Um, so we've talked a lot about tax savings and tax deductions, and I wanted to spend just a brief couple minutes talking about how Herd might be able to help you optimize your tax deductions and set you up for success. So Forrest, you want to jump to the next slide? So awesome. We have recently launched a very cost-friendly bookkeeping solution at $50 a month. And so we've talked a lot throughout the presentation about organizing your expenses and bringing everything into one place so that you can stay on top of all of those expenses. And so we provide monthly done for you bookkeeping. We have really straightforward financial reports, unlimited expert messaging support. So if you have questions that come up throughout the year, you can ask those questions. We're always here to help you, and we have an amazing team of folks like Michael and our bookkeeping team and our payroll team and our accounting team and our tax team and everybody internally that is excited and ready to support you and experts in supporting folks in private practice. And mostly we provide you the opportunity to have peace of mind about your finances and stay organized. Ooh, let me go back to this next one. We do, however, for folks that are more established in their practice or looking for a more comprehensive set of services, have a couple different plans as well. And so we have the essential plan, which is awesome for sole proprietors. So you could be a sole prop, you could be an LLC or a PLLC that has not yet elected to be taxed as an S corp. We will provide you quarterly tax estimates and payment guidance throughout the year. That can be really scary for folks to be able to stay on top of that. And it's really important to stay on top of so you don't have any unwanted liabilities at the end of the year. We provide you S Corp election guidance and support. So let's say you hit 80K of income or $100,000 of income, and you're like, can I save money by becoming an S Corp? Is that something that I should elect? Our amazing team will help you understand that. We'll put together compensation reports and help you understand how to bridge towards setting up payroll and managing all the wonderful things that come with being an S corp on top of the tax savings. In this plan as well, we'll provide you personal income tax filing support. So a lot of times folks will come to us and be like, you can file the business part of my practice, but can you also file the personal thing? And so whether you're married, filing single, head of household, we'll be able to support you with the personal filings and the Schedule C associated with that. We do have a premium service, of course, for the S Corps that we support and also growing group practices, whether you're just getting started or having a larger group practice. And we'll help with the business income tax prep and filing on top of the personal income tax prep on filing. We will manage all of the payroll through the system. And so there was a great question in the chat. There is payroll as a part of our software operating. And Forrest talked a lot about the types of expenses that you might include as tax deductible. That evolves and changes a little bit. And so we'll help you set up the accountable plan as an S Corp. And so whether you're just getting started and just looking to get your finances organized and get access to additional support, or you're looking for a more comprehensive and premium set of services, we have a lot of different plans that can support you. And we also provide financial advisory and tax advisory services as well. Forrest, do you want to keep jamming?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, sorry. Keep looking at the same time.
Okay, awesome. So a couple things that I also wanted to highlight are some of the recent launches that we had, because our engineering and product team have been hard at work, and our designers. That's why it looks so beautiful. This is our real-time financial dashboard, and so you're able to, at any moment in time, jump in and at a very high level see where you're at and how you're trending month over month. You're able to set targets and goals for yourself, and you're able to look at the plethora of different income sources and whether it's products or services that you might be able to track against. And so I will jump to the next slide here and highlight that specifically. And so one of the things that our team just launched, because one of the main challenges of being a private practice owner is that income isn't always super consistent or fluid, and sometimes during the summer there's a slowdown when people are out of school or traveling. And so being able to plan ahead and really look at, okay, my session fee is this, or I charge my patients this for X service and this for Y service and this for Z service, and I sell this product for X amount. Being able to map that out and work back into what those income goals are and build a baseline for what you need to achieve to hit those goals. So then you can start thinking about the more important things beneath that. How do I plan for retirement? How do I plan for time off? Am I able to cover my personal and business expenses? And so this helps you stay ahead and avoid any challenges. And so you can think about, again, Herd as your core bookkeeping, payroll, and tax service provider, of course, with financial advisory, but we're also there to help provide you a real-time look into your finances throughout the year and plan and look ahead. Forrest, anything else to add? You're much better at this pitch than I am.
No, I think we're sitting right on track. So perfect segue. If you want to learn more about Herd, we highly recommend scheduling one of our free consultations. It's not a sales call. It's with one of our wonderful new business advisors who talk to 5 to 10 private practice professionals a day. And the goal one, learn more about you, your business, your goals, and then see if is the services and support that Herd provides even a good fit. Then if you want, they can show you more like those product screenshots like Andrew was sharing about how Herd would fit into your businesses and the services we provide. One of the great things about being a Jane member is you save 20% on our annual plans. And this is exclusive to Jane. So you'll see that promo code down there, which you don't have to even keep in mind. Your new business advisor will help remind you of that in event that you are interested in signing up. So definitely take advantage of this. Like I said, even if it's just to learn more about services that Herd provides, even if you don't need a CPA right now, best to do that due diligence and research now before you get into the busy weeds of tax season. Similar to today, just wanted no one to have false expectations. When you're chatting with those new business advisors, they can't answer personalized tax questions. But if you ask like, hey, does Herd provide quarterly tax estimates, or how does Herd calculate my estimates? They just can't give you your actual state estimate, which our software and team would do as a member. And then the last call out to make here is Q3 tax estimates. So the IRS, and then if your state has income tax, that deadline is September 15th. We do a whole nother webinar on quarterly taxes. Maybe we'll have to come back and do one of those, but keep in mind 9/15, September 15th, that payment is due. And if you need help with those estimates, Herd has a sign up deadline on August 11th because we need to go back to January 1st and get all those fun bookkeeping records up to date. With that being said, I'll hand it back over to Destin and the Jane team.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You actually beat me to something I was going to say, which was, in addition to all of this, Herd provides a lot of other great free resources. So you have other webinars, you have other things available. So even if Herd isn't the fit for you right now, or you're not ready for it, you do have all of these other webinars and great resources that we can potentially link out to some of them in the email that we send out. Because I feel like that's what we really love about Herd is it's similar to us in that we want to just provide valuable resources to people. And so that's a really, really great offering, and we'll link to some of those in our follow-up email. But yeah, so before we wrap up, we wanted to cover a few notes from Jane. So just to remind everybody, that we have our unlimited support on phone, email, and live chat. So if you have any questions about anything we chatted about today, anything else about your account, you always have a human on the other end to chat with. Even on Saturdays, which is so great. So we have our team available on Saturdays. And then we have just an average minutes wait time for our calls. So you can talk to a human at Jane anytime you need. And the poll just popped up to just let us know what you think about today's webinar, as well as we continue to build more content and helpful resources for you. We'd love to know what you thought about today's session. And then my screen to move. I think maybe because the poll is up, I'm having a little bit of a challenge moving this. Just give me a second. Try and this to move. There we go. Someone else did it for me, maybe. And then the other thing we have in addition to our support is also our community. So we have two community groups. One in particular you might find very interesting, which is our US billing community. So check them out if you want. It's a place where our community members get together and chat and support each other. So you can ask any questions just like you were asking today. It's a great place to ask those types of things, specific deductions. How does this work? Because you might have another person in your same discipline, even in your same region in the community, that you can ask that question for. We've got about 20,000 people in our main community and close to 2,000 in our US billing community. So you've got a lot of what I will say friends and colleagues in there that help you out. So please do check it out if you're interested in getting some peer-to-peer support in our community. And then on to Q&A. So thank you to everyone who stuck around. I think we're really close to time, or maybe over the time. So if you have to leave, I just saw someone say they have a consult, so feel free to pop out if you have to go somewhere else. This is being recorded, so we will share this out with you. But we wanted to leave a little bit of time for some Q&A to answer any of the questions that people might have had. Forrest and Andrew, I know you were both keeping an eye on the chat and Q&A as well. So was there anything that popped up throughout the session that you thought might be good to answer again live?
Pulling that back up right now.
Yeah. I think one that I saw that might be interesting to answer live is just a little bit, I think you've covered it already, but how is Herd different than some of the other options that are out there? I saw, I think Andrew or someone wrote a really great response. I don't want to steal it. So how is it different? Like what's different about it?
Yeah, so Herd was built specifically for private practice owners and solo and group practice owners. Our team is built with practitioners. We've built our product alongside practitioners. We have a customer advisory board that supports them. Our support team, our support documents, all of our articles in our community is oriented and tailored around private practice ownership. And a lot of the tooling that we've built in the platform, from tax deductions to income planning and tax filings at the end of the year, is oriented around helping private practitioners save as much time and money as they can. And so yeah, great question. Thanks, Dustin.
Awesome. Yeah, the purpose-built platform is so big in this scenario, and I think you've sort of illustrated in this session how that makes a lot of sense. I see there's a couple of others in the Q&A, so I'll read those out for you. So Miles asked, since it's July, if we join with Herd, what would the cost be to go back from January to present to get our books caught up?
Forrest, do you have the specific amount on the catch-up bookkeeping?
I do. So great question, Miles. Like that you're thinking about starting January 1st, right? I think that's the thing when you think about bookkeeping, or most bookkeeping services will start January 1st, 2025. So you have an accurate outlook on your finances as well as for this Q3 estimate, right? You need to calculate all quarters before you just jump to that calculation. So normally it is $99 a month to catch up for bookkeeping. However, we do have some time-bound discounts and offers that our new business advisors provide. And so if you sign up, within 5 to 7 days, there's a higher discount and low on. So there's a great way to save through those historical bookkeeping fees, is what we call them, via one of those consults. So chat with them and they can learn more about how to get some of those waived.
Awesome. And then Diana has asked, what about medical expenses?
This is a fun one. I think you break it down and I'll let Andrew chime in too, but there's your health insurance, and then there's what I would call like out-of-pocket general medical expenses. The tough part with your out-of-pocket medical expenses is most folks, unless they had a really difficult year from a health side, will not meet the minimum to make it worthwhile. What I mean by that is in the tax code, you can take a standard deduction or itemized deduction. If you're taking the standard deduction, which the IRS just gives you a set amount, depending if you're single, married, filing jointly, right? I want to say singles maybe like 15,000 or something this year. And so you would have to have enough itemized deductions to beat out that standard deduction. And so with medical expenses specifically, I think one, you only get 1% of them. So what I would do is if you did have, maybe a more medical heavy year, calculate the rough total of what those medical expenses were. Don't charge them to your business. And then see with your CPA at the end of the year, does it make sense to itemize my deductions? And then when it comes to health insurance, that can actually sometimes be a business expense. Depends on your corporation type, if you're an S corp, and then as well as if you're married, filing jointly, if your spouse has insurance offered. So there are some intricacies, but that is one that you're able to see some folks write off. Andrew,
And
anything
then
else to
as a
add?
follow-up, oh, sorry, and as a follow-up, Sarah asked, what about long-term disability insurance? How does that fit into this conversation as well?
I would need to refresh myself on that unless Michael has any, as our current CPA has, a little rusty on that one.
Awesome. I feel like one thing I'm learning from this session for myself, and I feel like it could be a good series for you, is a series called "Is This a Deduction?" And just answer questions, just very short and sweet. Could be a social media series. Is this a deduction? Because it seems like really tricky and nuanced, and there's lots of layers. But I've learned a lot, which is very helpful. And I see Michael's jumped in there as well into the chat, so thank you so much. And
Well, on that note,
then
Dustin, one of our favorite things to say is it depends. We did a good job and didn't say it that much, but you'll hear accountants use those two words a lot. It depends.
yeah, exactly. So the series might get a little repetitive then, but you might have a few good answers in there. And then our last one is from Diana, and she asked, if my main time is spent treating clients in their home, but everything else I do in my home office is my home office, is my home office then my main work location?
From that information, I'd say yes. I can't give personal tax advice, but the way you're presenting that, if I was talking to Jane or Jill down the road, then I would say yes. So it doesn't matter. You don't have to have a physical office elsewhere. Purely if the primary time you're spending working, whether it's on the computer with patients, with clients, is at home, then you're good to go. And the other piece just to mention about this home office deduction is if you rent an office, right, and you're only there 10 hours a week and doing 30 hours at home, you could still write off the rent as part of your business expenses, right? That doesn't stop you from writing that expense and taking the home office deduction. The most critical piece is where's the majority of that time spent?
Amazing. Well, that is the last of our open questions. Forrest, Andrew, was there any other questions you wanted to answer? Anything else that came up? All right.
Andrew
I
loves
think
giving outros. Come on, guys. I know you got some good words to say.
Sure, an outro. No, I just thank you to Destin for having us, but also just reiterating thank you everybody for staying, for asking your questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. Again, as Destin said, we have a ton of amazing resources for free on our website. We do workshops and webinars like this all the time. And so if our services aren't right for you, that's totally fine. We're not here to push that. Here to drive education. And remember, a lot of this stuff is hard. So work towards building the perfect system, certainly, but don't give yourself a lot of grief if you don't have the perfect system in place right now. Take the time to get there, and hopefully you've taken away something interesting and fun and that you had a good time in this conversation today. And just really grateful again to the Jane team for having us.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. Thanks for everyone for sticking around a little bit extra to do a bit of Q&A. And as we said, this is being recorded and the recording will be sent out to you shortly, as well as some links to some resources and some additional information. So thank you everybody so much. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Thank you, Forrest and Andrew and Michael and everyone from the Jane team for being here. And we'll see you all in another webinar. Thank you, everyone. Bye.